Welcome back to the EMMAUS table. My name is Stephanie Quick, and this is another Table Talks. I'm joined this week by Stephen Holmes and Reed Smith. Reed has directed, spearheaded a couple of films many of you have seen, Icy Nations, and most recently, Sojourners and Exiles. So I feel like I said that wrong somehow.
You got it right.
I told him right
It's a
before we started
mouthful,
to hit
but
record, like, I need to, there will be a day I'm not hosting these things and it'll be a good day, but I couldn't even get 20 seconds into that without botching something. But anyway, the film is great. And Steven, I mean, I've known Steven for like forever, but we've got mutual friends, hadn't seen each other for a long time, reconnected last year when we tricked him into going on a trip with Joel Richardson to Saudi and then made him tag along on some additional film stuff for The Great Rain, which we just dropped a teaser trailer for recently. So maybe by the time this is published, we'll have the next one out. But would you guys like to introduce yourselves further, Stephen? What are the buckets behind you?
Buckets behind me are full of coffee because I'm a full-time coffee roaster, have a coffee business, and actually I'm more of just the administrator of the business now for the last 8 years. It's called Peregrine Coffee Roasters, and believe it or not, those are food safe buckets, even though they just say Lowe's on them. And our coffee is in there resting for wholesale accounts that need rested espresso because it functions best after about a month after roast. So that is what I do. Otherwise, I'm a very passionate Gentile about what the Jewish faith is and what the gospel should be understood as by Gentiles. And I've spent the last, really since, I guess, 2007, so talking about almost 20 years, discipling Gentiles in a gospel that should be understood based on the Torah and the prophets. That's what I'm real passionate about.
I'm really grateful that you both are here today, because as we get to know Reed and your story, and I wanted to start the conversation discussing your latest film, but if you can give us a little bit of context. So Steven's in Colorado, Reed's in Nashville, I'm over here in Israel, but we worked out our internet, our connectivity, and our time zones, and we're all here together. I just thought this would be a really compelling pair of you. You guys have not met in person, correct? This was your first.
yeah, just digitally.
I'm just here to bring the world together.
Well, technically, we still haven't met in person.
Yeah,
I don't think this counts.
but yeah. Well, you're fired. Up until now, both of these men were part of the EMMAUS table editorial panel, and I just am really grateful for. I truly am really grateful for what you both bring to the proverbial table. So, Reed, can you tell us a little bit, like, what made you start doing documentaries? What led you to take on this last project?
Yeah. Well, I started, I went to film school straight out of high school with a.
That's why yours are so much better than ours.
No, not true. But that's why from the get-go, I did have my eyes set on documentary. I mean, my freshman year, I declared a major in documentary and ended up transferring and not getting a documentary degree. But that was kind of my passion, because I was just always impacted by true stories and real stories, whether they're historical, but more so things that are happening right now. I've just always thought that was so interesting and a great way to communicate a message. And then it really wasn't until I was actually telling Stephen this earlier, when I started to watch some of y'all's early films, it was like light bulb moments of like, these things can actually be used in the context of discipleship, whether that's to teach, to exhort and encourage in something, whether that's to provoke. There's just a lot of different ways that these sort of films can be used in discipleship and really, amplify different messages and zoom in on different communities or characters, things that are happening. So, much of that is credit to you guys, Stephanie, and kind of pioneering in that and showing that there is a way to make documentaries that are missional. So I still I still work in the, production world as a freelancer. I'm outside of Nashville and do a lot of different things, but obviously the things I'm most passionate about are films that, I feel like, in a sense, that God has called me to make that have to do with discipleship, whether that's strengthening, encouraging, exhorting, teaching, whatever that may be. That's what I'm most passionate about.
I love it. I love it. So, Sojourners in Exile, singular. Am I saying?
Exiles.
Help me out here.
Yeah.
Sojourners in Exile. I obviously didn't do my homework, but I have seen it, and I remember thinking, like, because this film came out 3 months ago,
February?
4 months ago.
Yeah, about 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
I should know that probably better, but yeah.
You can at least say the title correctly.
Yeah.
So
Your own
great.
film.
But you do these things, you upload it, and then it's like a blur. Like the baby's born, and
yeah.
it
Well, it's
flies
crazy
away,
because it was like the same time that actually my daughter, our second born, was born. It was like within the same like week and a half, 2 weeks. So it's all kind of a blur,
Man, yeah.
You don't know up from down when that happens.
Yeah.
Right.
That's when he's like, "What was?
So I have an
what was the month
excuse.
that I blacked out? February. It must have been February.
Yeah, it was February.
Yeah. Well, cool. And I sometimes when I watch, I don't know if anybody else is like this. This is going to make me sound really pretentious, but everybody is valid. Sometimes when I see stuff that people do, I'm like, wow, they beat me to that. That is so cool. And maybe I would have approached it a little bit differently. Maybe I would have, like, I was watching House of David recently, which is really just not my genre. I've never really, pursued that kind of thing. But there's like a couple things that I'd be like, I would have tweaked that. I would have, when he confronts Goliath, they changed the verbiage a little bit. In the text, he says, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" And they left that part. I actually think it's really important because it points to the covenant. Who's this Gentile outside of the covenant boasting against the covenant? But anyway, but sometimes I watch stuff and I'm like, I'm blown away. And I'm so glad I never thought about doing that kind of thing, but I'm so glad somebody's doing it and they're doing it well. And then other times somebody will do something, I'm like, oh, you almost had it, and I was years back, I remember watching, there's a Joaquin Phoenix film on Mary Magdalene, which is called Mary. I don't remember the actress's name, but it focuses on their relationships. I was really worried, and then I'm watching, I'm like, this is actually really beautiful. They use this really deliberate storytelling device. They completely honor the integrity of their relationship. They don't make it weird at all. So I'm like, awesome. I'm blown away. But then it gets to the end, and it literally, like, she's running back and telling the guys like about the resurrection, and they completely pivot to they also did some kind of weird philosophical things with Judas, but they pivot to no guys, the king, like the resurrection, he's going to go fly away to heaven, and now we have the kingdom as a warm and fuzzy feeling on our inside. So you can like surrender all of these massive hopes you've had for redemption and deliverance and everything the prophets have spoken. It's spiritual. It's a warm and fuzzy feeling on the inside. And I was like, no, I would almost prefer you never made it. But anyway, when I was watching Sojourners and Exiles, I was like, oh, there'd be like this segment hitting some kind of thing, and I'd be like, oh gosh, that makes my brain think about this other thing over here. And then by the end, like, you covered all of that ground, you wove so many things together, and I didn't see coming, like, you had this, I don't want to like give a huge spoiler alert. I really like people should watch this. We're pointing to it, but like the way that you landed things in the covenant and in Israel, and even, and like, I don't mean to use like branded language, but like the controversy surrounding the covenant and the way it bears upon the nations and presses different people as a stumbling block. I thought, based on the title, we were going to explore, like, exclusively explore, like, I'm looking for the city whose builder and maker is God.
Right.
And there's enough there that you can kind of mine that out and ignore a less popular message and a more confrontational side of it, that's like the abrasive edge of, yeah, but that builder and maker, that city that's not made by human hands has a threshold of cost, and you have to confess some things. And um, so anyway, can you give, what is like the thesis of the film when you started? What was the journey
Yeah.
as you went through it?
Yeah, it was definitely, that's the right verbiage there, as a journey, because I think the film I had in mind when, and I don't know how you work in this, Stephanie, if this is similar to you, or I know Stephen, you do music as well. I don't know if this is similar, like in y'all's creative endeavors, but what I started with is definitely not what I finished with. It was a major
Mm,
journey, and I think one of the things, like you talk about how, um, you were, uh, like the way we landed it and brought it back in to the covenant, and towards the back half of the movie, of the film, that wasn't something that was intended. It was,
mm,
as we were making this film, it was like, you just cannot. I mean, you can, but I
Separate.
could not tell the story of embracing the cross, of this message of the gospel, and laying down your life, without rooting it in the story of Israel, not just as a history, not just as background, but as what God is still doing, and the
mm,
gospel that we're still committed to, and the hope that we are holding to. It is, for me, it was like, we had to do this. It had to be rooted in, again, not just the history of the prophets and the oracles, but these oracles that are unfolding today, in this story of Israel that is in the body of Messiah that is being written today. Um, and so that was a journey. And that was something, like, I've been just kind of, the last 2 years, I feel like, been drinking from a fire hose, since, like, stepping into this project, and just like, wow, you don't know what you don't know,
mm.
until you know. Yeah. So a journey is the best way to say it, for sure. And hopefully a few people were able to come on the journey with me,
Mm.
in watching the film.
So when you started, you think we need to do a project that explores the issue of suffering?
Hmm. Yeah, it was the teachings of Jesus that, um, started, like, it was actually based off Joel Richardson recommended the Apocalyptic Gospel podcast, and I had been following Joel since I had been following you guys with FAI, and then, um, he recommended the Apocalyptic Gospel podcast, and then that led to, this, like, eye opening, like, wow, there
Mm,
really is a tangible hope of the kingdom. And that being what this is all about, this future oriented promise. And obviously they present it like, the teachings of Jesus is, you lay your life down now to take it up and he'll give it back in the age to come. Like, you embrace the cross, you embrace suffering now, and you'll receive everlasting life. So it was through wrestling with that stuff that I was like, I want to make a film about this.
mm,
It was through that wrestle of Jesus's teachings, like, kind of some of his fundamental calls to discipleship. That's what got me in. And then I got into it, and it was like, yeah, this isn't going to make, you know, this isn't going to make the best film in the world or everyone's favorite film, but I just think those things just don't make full sense outside of the
mm.
story of Israel, and outside of Jesus being the Messiah of Israel, and the prophetic oracles of Israel. So that's kind of a maybe a short version of kind of how we went down that path.
Yeah, Hudson Taylor and A.T. Pearson both had very similar experiences. Hudson Taylor just says a friend. He was talking to a friend. A.T. Pearson says it was George Mueller, but they had both kind of held um, this is the millennium, or kind of that warm and fuzzy feeling kind of
Mm,
thing. And they both had the way Pearson tells the story. He was on a train ride with George Mueller, and it was like George Mueller, A.T. Pearson, Charles Spurgeon, Hudson Taylor was a younger guy, but they were all kind of running together at one point. And George Mueller said, "All right, Pearson, like, hit me," because Pearson covered Spurgeon's pulpit when Spurgeon was ill towards the end of his life, and he said,
mm,
"Tell me what you like. What's your MO?" Or whatever. They're just talking, and so Pearson gives this, kind of unpacks the whole thing. He's a really, really articulate, eloquent, intelligent man, very gifted teacher, and Mueller I mean, I haven't read the story in like 10, 15 years, but if I'm remembering right, they're, Mueller, I just feel like Mueller would be the guy with like a pipe, kicking back, like just did not care, whatever, vibe. And he kind of leans in and he said, man, Pearson, you're like, you have a way with words. Everything you just said was really beautiful. Problem is, not a single thing that just came out of your mouth is actually in scripture. And Taylor and Pearson both, like their friend, they both had a brother who loved them go, that's cute, but that's actually not the Bible. That's like Oprah or Rob Bell or so, like, but it's actually not what the prophets and the apostles spoke. And it pushed both of them enough to go, uh-huh. And then they go and they check it out. And that confrontation shifted both of them. And Hudson Taylor came out of that experience, and he kind of used language that you're using now. And he said, I realized that this message, that the gospel of the kingdom, like you can't have a kingdom without a king. He said, I realized that this is a thoroughly practical hope. And that, like, it thrust him and put the wind in his sails to China. Stephen, have you had that kind of experience at all as you've waded through these waters?
Oh yeah. I think in seeking to be a disciple, when you come into contact with Israel initially, sometimes the catalyst is Israel, sometimes the catalyst is suffering. Read, what I appreciated about your film is you found yourself needing to be faithful to the truth that, oh no, these things overlap. And if I don't show that, it's not being honest to what the gospel is. And that's why the film was powerful, because you saw it drawing together, right? You saw the suffering in Africa, and then you saw, wait, this is tied to a Jewish apocalyptic hope. And I think some people would just go, wait a second, yeah, that doesn't even make sense. Why is he bringing this in? But it was you being honest to the testimony of the scriptures that made it so beautiful. There was never that moment of, oh no, it's going the wrong direction. It was, this is all going the right direction. And as a young man, I think, I came in contact with Israel, and then was in, the whole IHOP scene, and was kind of more in the line of, I started finding out, oh wow, millennial kingdom. That's really exciting. But the more I looked towards that expression of, that was a very kingdom now, prayer movement now, that was kind of becoming the thing. The Lord was steadily drawing me into a time when we had a house church in Kansas City with John Harrigan and Joel Richardson, and we were just investigating, what does this actually mean for me as a disciple? If there's a literal kingdom in the future, and it's not spiritually taking place now, and this covenant, and that I use the phrase, the testimony of the Father in the law and the prophets, and the identity of Jesus. For me, it's been if Matthew 1:1 says he's the son of David, son of Abraham, this is the genealogy of Yeshua Mashiach. What's a Messiah? What does it mean to be the son of David? And what does it mean to be the son of Abraham? And then if you start tying that into the Luke 24, did not the Messiah have to suffer before entering into his glory? It's like, wait, have to suffer? And then Paul identifies that as the mystery that's being administrated by the Father. It's this suffering before glory, that idea. And so that plays into all Jesus' teachings of taking up your cross. If you want to follow me, this is what you have to do, right? And so, Paul, I'm wearing this chain for the sake of the hope of Israel. Hold on a second. I thought you were an apostle of the Gentiles. You start looking in the scriptures, and Steph, I know you talk a lot about biblical literacy. It's really just saying, this stuff's here, and I've decided to care about it, and then I've decided to let it affect me. Otherwise, I'm just identifying concepts in the Bible and moving on to the next teaching or the next wind of doctrine. But if I'm going to look at the scriptures, and then I'm going to try to hear the Holy Spirit, and then I'm going to let that actually affect my life directly, then it's really obvious. It's a simple story, right? The hope of Israel, the hope of Jesus fulfilling the law and the prophets, as he says in Matthew 5, that was supposed to be the all-consuming hope for every believer, for Jew and for Gentile.
Yep.
And so to actually have that aha moment, that's what was happening in 2010, 11, 12 for me was, wait, all this is true and it's literal. It's not spiritual and allegorical and I'm supposed to have a fuzzy feeling. But then it was, what happens is if it becomes true, then you have the big, oh crap moment of, oh, it's going to affect my life via suffering.
Yeah.
Via the road
Right.
of suffering.
Mm.
And then that's where
Right.
you start to get mad at the Lord, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like Psalm 119 is such a beautiful place. You have the psalmist says, and I love this, and I think it should be mined further by us these days. Psalm 119, he says, I'm devoted to your Torah. Princes persecute me without cause.
Mm.
I love your law and your precepts. They're slandering me behind my back. And so you have this dichotomy that's presented in the law and the prophets, but Psalm 119 articulates it really well.
Mm.
The man who loves the Torah and wants to follow the Father and Yeshua's commands. And so that's why Yeshua has the foundation to say what he says, right? He's not just coming out of left field and saying, yeah, it's suffering before glory. It's like, no, these things, I mean, look at Joseph in the pit, right? Look at David's life, anointed king, not king for 20 years, his sons betraying him, right? That the story of the gospel and narrative, if we then decide to believe it, it has to then affect us. And then that's the, oh no, right? And it becomes that grief of, all right, then I'm going to endure because this is the testimony of the gospel at work in my life. It's not just something I'm reading. And to stand firm in the days ahead, when that started hitting us, and then we went on a journey to just, I guess, let it affect us. I number one, didn't think it would be so hard. I didn't think there would be such intense rejection. And I didn't think it could end in other wild objects of suffering. But if, Philippians 3, and if we want to know him in his sufferings, the fellowship of his sufferings, and be conformed to his death. I don't even like saying this right now on a podcast. Actually, I'm realizing I was telling you that stuff a couple of weeks ago. I don't even know if we should talk about that because it means that the Lord's going to hold us accountable. He's going to say, oh, I'm so glad you said that out loud. And then, and then he needs us to prove that with our lives. And it can be super hard.
I want to be like, we've proved it. I've proved it already, right?
Yeah. It's like, I think I want to go back to the fuzzy feeling.
Yeah.
I wasn't so accountable.
Yeah.
I wasn't so accountable to the gospel with the fuzzy feeling. So go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I wonder, there's probably a few different types of people listening to this, and thank you for taking the time to listen to the three of us waffle.
Yeah.
But I tell a story in the Great Rain that'll come out probably in the fall that I had a really transformative experience through loss when I was in high school. But now I can look back on that and go, 39, late 30s, 20, gosh, this was, I hit that time in my life. This was more than 20 years ago. And, it just sneaks up on you, doesn't it? I'm young, I'm hip. I threw my back out last week, but everything is fine. But, when I was in high school, and I can look back on it now and go, yeah, I had completely sincere faith before the Lord. I was in Jesus, I don't look back on that and go, oh, I would have failed a theology SAT test, and so I probably wouldn't get to heaven. Like, saved, locked in, puppy barking behind me. But I had what I call inch deep theology of youth group faith. And what I appreciate about the gospel of the kingdom is that it makes sense of suffering and provides concrete solutions for loss, for things that are broken in this life. Like, I tweaked my back last week, or I tore my knee when I was snowboarding in college, and I still, like, if it starts raining or something, my knee still swells. So I just am always like, anybody who's like, this is, we're living in the kingdom now. I'm like, I don't think that we are. Like, if this is it, eat, drink, and be merry, and tomorrow we die. But if there's a promise that, like, God has a plan and a solution to make every wrong thing right. So when I was going through suffering that I couldn't make sense of, and then later as I got older and grew in grace and the Lord illuminated the scriptures, I became familiar with the prophets and I could see the broader story. I went, oh, it doesn't make what we've gone through okay, but I have a, that sure and steadfast hope, that anchor of our souls is that you will fix this one day. And I think the thing that keeps us from that becoming just a warm and fuzzy feeling, the anchor is the city of Jerusalem. So I want to give, people are listening to this and they go, I don't really know what my theology is on any of this or whatever, but I know I love Jesus and I know that life is hard, in different seasons or whatever. Like, I don't want it to submit to, I don't want anybody to get the impression of like, if you don't check these boxes the way that we check these boxes, then you're going to get it wrong. But I think in our experience, all three of us have been infused with hope. It's life-giving. There's a solution. He's going to fix it. He has a plan. And suffering actually plays what he's leveraged it such, like Joseph's life, David's life, that suffering can play a really redemptive role to draw forth life. But if the grain does not fall into the ground as a seed and die, then nothing's going to grow out of it. So it's appointed unto man to die once, because you have to return to dust so that you can be resurrected into immortality and everlasting life with him in the world made right, in the world renewed, in the regenesis. And so I just wanted to kind of float that out there. But the anchor is Jerusalem. And so I just wanted to kind of float to you guys, like, as we think about these things. And it's hard in a podcast to like talk about massive concepts and distill it down. And I really didn't give you guys a lot of prep. I don't know, we'll just kind of poke the bear, see where it goes. Reed made a film about suffering, so yeah. But did you have a moment where you went, did you have a inch deep theology, youth group faith, warm and fuzzy feeling, and then go, oh, there's the sure and steadfast anchor in Jerusalem? And what was that process like for you? Well, it feels weird to say, like, no, this city, this geopolitical, like, this city will make sense of it for you. Somebody might be like, what?
Right.
I got to go let the puppy out to pee, but you guys.
You're good. You're good. Yeah. I would say.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. I think, the first thing I think about, Stephen, you mentioned the, like, you start coming into some of these concepts and understanding, and then it hits you personally about what that means for you, what that means for your life. And I definitely think that moment for me is what inspired me to make the film. And it wasn't because of I had that moment and then I was like, all right, now I'm ready, to suffer and die for Jesus. And so now I'm going to make a film about it. It was like, I had that moment and I was like very much disagreeing with the gospel in my heart. Honestly, like I very much was, and I'm sure we can all relate in a sense of like, I really love my life. And I was wrestling with that, because I said after the apocalyptic gospel, like getting into that, it was like this wrestle with the teachings of Jesus. And like when I say wrestle, I mean, I was like, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And that was, I would say probably the first time in my life that I was like, yeah, I really don't want what Jesus is telling me to do. And that was deeply uncomfortable for me, deeply uncomfortable. And so it was like, I need to pursue figuring this out, because I know there's people around the world that are doing it, that are giving up their life, that are embracing the cross. And, I might say that, I've got more of a Bible education than they do. I grew up in the church, and the Western church. I've got all sorts of teachers and different people feed me things, but at the end of the day, they're willing and lovingly embracing suffering in the cross? What is it that, that they're onto that I'm not onto? And that kind of set me down the path of trying to pursue this. And the thing about Jerusalem, Stephanie, I think totally, excuse me, I think the it being an anchor, God's covenant being the anchor of all of this, and the redemption, and like Stephen said, Jesus is the son of David, he's the son of Abraham, and that being something that, it really is an anchor, and it really is a concrete thing. And the deeper you go into it, I think just the stronger that connection becomes, and the stronger that story becomes. And you realize that you yourself, by God's mercy, have been brought into this story that's way bigger than you.
Yeah.
That you didn't deserve to be in, and so that's what it is for me, Stephanie, that you mentioned about what is it about Jerusalem that anchors us. It's real. It's a real place with real history with God, with real prophetic promises, and by his mercy, me, a Gentile in America, has somehow been able to connect myself to that. And he's actually given me a promise to raise me from the dead if I'm able to deny myself and follow Jesus. I don't know. That would be my 2 cents there.
Which is amazing, right? I think what you're saying, and with the idea of Jerusalem, it takes the ethereal and then it gives you an actual place, and it gives you an actual story. So you're identifying tenets of a narrative, and all that's happening is the human heart is suddenly becoming awake to these things. Wait, Jerusalem's still a real place. And the prophets say that the Messiah is going to reign from this place. And Jewish apocalyptic literature literally revolves around the inheritance of this place. And so Jesus and the apostles aren't just pulling these ideas out of the law and the prophets. They're giving us the New Testament as an interpretation of Jewish apocalyptic literature and the law and the prophets, and saying Jewish apocalyptic literature is in line with the law and the prophets. Because, when you're in First Enoch and some of these books, it is so extremely land-centric that the inheritance of the age to come revolves around that city of Jerusalem. And then, it's basically a large commentary on Isaiah chapter 2 and Micah 4 of, in the age to come, the mountain of God is going to be the place in Jerusalem where all of the nations come to learn from the God of Jacob. There's going to be an awakening moment. And all of the nations are going to say, we need to sojourn, right? Mm-hmm. Up to the mountain of God to learn from the God of Jacob, and that's Jerusalem. When it becomes a place, I think the human heart, it kind of, I love the idea of unplugging from the matrix. It's just like, boom, I'm pulling out that plug of the ethereal heaven to come, because it makes no sense. I've never related to it. It's not exciting. It's not something I even want. The only happy idea about that is that Jesus is going to be there, and I've tried to convince myself that it's just going to be worth it because of him. But when you pull into, wait a second, there's a place on this earth he's coming back to reign from, and that city was essentially promised to Abraham and his descendants, right, in Genesis 12 through 22. And then Hebrews 11 tells us that he wasn't given that promise yet. He died without receiving the promise. And then you start to just ponder, well, these must have future implications. If I'm going to believe those words, it must have future implications, because we, to use a crass phrase, we castrate the gospel, right? We dishonor the Father's words if we don't just let those words in the law and the prophets have meaning, literal meaning in the future. We are literally dishonoring what the Father prophesied as hope. And so then we truncate the hope, we lose it. So if the human heart begins just coming alive to these ideas like Jerusalem, the city of the great king, right? Why would Jesus say that? He says, don't swear by Jerusalem because it's the city of the great king. It's like, hold on a second. So that city matters to you. It should probably matter to me.
Mm.
And if it does matter, it must have future implications because he's about to die and he's going to go to heaven. And if we're all just supposed to go to heaven, that phrase means nothing. It doesn't have any bearing on anything with our faith. But if he said it and then he died and he's coming again, it just must have application. And so we're really just letting our hearts come alive to very simple principles in the scriptures. Israel, Jerusalem, the land and the people. Right. I think if we as Gentiles can also just mine the idea of what does it actually mean that we've been grafted in to a physical, ethnic, bloodline people? What does that mean? And if we could just answer that question, I think we could have a good trajectory to answer a lot of the other questions. But sometimes we just read over those things. They're just concepts and they stay allegorical. And we have so many teachers saying they are. And really, at the end of the day, we're not presenting anything novel in these ideas, right? We're just saying the scriptures say that it can be true in the future. Hold on to the future hope. And our hearts can come alive to it. And back to what you were saying, Steph, is it then produces the ability to endure to the end, to endure the sufferings so that he has a bride that's made worthy. He has an individual who was willing to become like him in his sufferings and endure these things in the hope of what he's going to bring. But Jerusalem is one of the anchors, 100%.
That's even like the hinge that like Hebrews takes that path. You know, you have the Hebrews 11, all of these people went through all of this incredible suffering and testing of their faith, all of these reasons to deny it and let go of the hope, but they held fast. Therefore, let us look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, lay aside, let's get rid of every dead weight sin that's hindering you from running your race and run it to the end, hit the finish line, complete your race. You know what I mean? But that, sorry.
It literally ends Hebrews 11 and says, all these died without receiving what was promised. Like, what the heck? You just went through the whole line of faith. So fix your eyes on Jesus. It says, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. Speaking of the resurrection of the dead, when we're all made perfect. So we have this great cloud of witnesses. I'm just commenting on what you're saying because it was the perfect segue there. We have this great cloud of witnesses that's giving us hope to live for and to endure. He endured sin to the point of bloodshed, right? And so what then the suffering does, the whole point is it produces righteousness. So it says earlier in Hebrews that he learned obedience through suffering. So what does the suffering do? It's just not for naught. It actually molds us and produces righteousness in us so that it's easier to forgive our enemies when they wrong us. So that it's easier to be like Jesus and lay down our life if we say yes to the suffering and the hope that is to come. Otherwise, it remains ethereal and we don't forgive our brother. And then we have to give an answer for that on the day of the Lord. We don't forgive those who wrong us. And instead, the suffering, when you endure it and you bless those who curse you and try to rejoice, it produces in a person the hope that's legitimate about the age to come. It makes us like Christ. But if you avoid it and preach a gospel of health and wealth now, you completely miss the point. You actually never become like Jesus. It's impossible because the physical component of suffering and following a suffering Messiah, the physical part of this life and suffering like him, you can never experience it if you have a health and wealth gospel. And so you don't actually become like him in that manner.
I really appreciate you elaborating on that. I do want to just apologize. The times that work really well to do podcasts with you guys is like wild hour for the dogs, but we just got it. Like somebody just knocked on the door. It was like that scene in Friends when everybody was in Monica's apartment. They look at each other like, who is, the dogs and I are like, everybody's home.
Yeah.
Anyway, everything is fine. But, that when Jesus quoted the Psalm and he referred to Jerusalem as the city of the great king, that was in the Sermon on the Mount. which takes all of the things that are in Torah, which are pretty, I think in Christendom we do this, like, I mean, like Paul kind of makes this point in Galatians, like nobody can fulfill the law. It's really difficult. So, but there's grace in Jesus, whatever. But in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is like, yeah, I know you read the books of Moses. I know you read the law of Moses, but I'm telling you, I'm actually narrowing the focus even more. So
Yeah.
any fool can live their whole life without murdering somebody. But I'm telling you, if you have anger in your brother towards your heart, you have that seedbed. You're already guilty of murder. Like, to me, it's all like, God sees everything. Like now the soil of your heart is under a forensic scan, and you're accountable to things in a way that
Yeah.
you maybe weren't before. So thank God there was the tutor setting the example, but now I'm giving you the helper because you really need it. So suffering might look like, Reed, your film opens in Africa, or there was a time when I was living in Iraq during the ISIS years, and I woke up in the morning and I was standing at the coffee station, and I remember going, all of the good beans are gone. And now I question the worth of Jesus. I resent the Great Commission. And now I'm suffering out here doing
Yeah.
hard stuff, drinking crappy coffee. I didn't have the good beans that are resting in Stephen's bucket. Yeah, like life is so hard. But the Lord, I don't think he really cares. Like maybe where you live and where you wake up in the morning is an issue of obedience. If he tells you go live somewhere, I'm assigning you to this place, whatever. But I think Jeff always told me there was, my pastor he said God gives more green lights than red lights. And it used to really offend me. And then, as I grew older and wiser, I was like, not really. I think that there's probably a lot of ways to run the race and get it right. There's not just like one way. And if you botch it, you botch it. But suffering can look like a lot of things in a lot of places. And even if all of your external circumstances are looking pretty good, there's still something in your heart that you have to test and weigh up and walk in obedience. And the thing that makes it worthwhile is that anchoring promise that God says, I'm going to dwell with you in real form on real soil. And I think this is why he ate so much when he was, all these stories of the resurrection. We don't know a whole lot, but we know he ate food. Like a lot of it, and I think there's the wedding feast, and he points out through the lips of the prophets, it's going to be really good wine and really good meat. Like there are things to be enjoyed. So this is why I think, Paul, when he's reflecting on the resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15, he's like, look, if this didn't happen, if we don't have a resurrected body to look forward to and a resurrected life and a resurrected world, then cast it all off and go AWOL. Why wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing in this generation right now is why wouldn't you is actually being played out among a generation. You don't have the hope of the resurrection, the hope of a literal kingdom coming. You don't have that idea of suffering before glory. Embrace it. And that you'll be given glory in the age to come. Like it's a real thing, eternal life in a real place. And so what you're seeing is, hey, we're going to eat and drink for tomorrow we die. So you've got a watered down gospel that a whole generation is saying, I see through that. That's stupid. That's dumb. I don't even see the point of what you're talking about. So I'm going to eat and drink for tomorrow we die. But if we can reclaim the gospel and trumpet that message and kind of infiltrate the church again with the gospel of the kingdom, I think that we can see true disciples that will lay down their life for Jesus and for the Jew, right, in the days to come. Because suffering in the days to come will be centralized around Jesus, brothers and sisters, and around what Jacob's trouble is and what those atrocities will look like. And it will be Corrie ten Booms and Dietrich Bonhoeffers that are hoppers. It'll be Dietrich Grasshoppers. It'll be Corrie ten Booms and Dietrich Bonhoeffers that are rising up, who just understand the gospel plainly and are willing to suffer for the Jew first and also for the Gentile.
I just want to put a stake in the ground. We will have more conversations that unpack that. Like that point that you just made is not only like there's gold in them there hills, but it's so pertinent for right now. We're filming this, I think a week or two before it, or a bit. I don't know. I'm trying to like stockpile, and make our workflow a little bit easier. So this is ahead of time, but this is the Friday of the week that the 12-day war came to a close, which is crazy that, like this mounting threat again, like existential threat against the state of Israel for 46 years is just like dusted in 11 and a half days or something. Overall, everybody here is kind of like, is this peacetime? Are we good? So now I've been gone, lost my train of thought.
You're going to
The
just
thing that's sweeping, as this conversation's hitting the internet, the thing that's sweeping is this qualification of, yeah, but like, who actually is Israel? Like, what does standing with Israel mean? And it reminds me of the Lord is saying, love your neighbor, da, 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 and then this lawyer in the crowd, always looking for a loophole, puts his hand up and goes, yeah, but teacher, not Lord, teacher, who actually is my neighbor, really? And he goes, so then he tells the story of the Good Samaritan that spins it on his head, or Peter going, yeah, okay, but like, how many times do I forgive my brother? Like 3 times, 4, like 7 times? I'd be like really good, right? And he was like, we get that 70 times 7 language. And so
seven.
the issue of like, anytime we're looking for a loophole, the Lord's going to go, oh, honey, this is going to bear down on your life in a way that you cannot fathom, and you are not prepared for it. And we need to get prepared. So we'll come back to that conversation. I'm going to make, just so you know, Stephen, this will not be your last Table Talks. Reed, I'm curious. You take this film that's not, you could have gone the pop song route and couched this in a way that would make it a little more popular, a little more marketable, a little more warm and fuzzy. But you said, as you were going through production, you went, I actually, and this is true, even the film that's coming, The Great Rain, like it pivoted, October 7th happened, and we were like, we have to kind of change the way that we're dealing with some things. And you thought, no, I like, it's a sizable, you didn't just like fit in. As an aside, I just want to kind of tip my hat and say, we'll come back to this in a future Table Talks episode. There is an issue of suffering that's tethered to Jerusalem, and it's going to bear down on your life, but you devoted quite a bit of airtime to that issue. What has the response been for you? You said you grew up in the church, you lived just outside of Nashville, Nashville's called the buckle of the Bible Belt. What are people thinking about this? What's the response been like?
Yeah. I guess I'll go 2 for 1 here about why kind of that emphasis, and then what kind of the response has been to that emphasis. I think on the first hand, I remember when I was kind of ironing out the edit, you kind of have it finished, and then you think about it again and change a little more, do some tweaks and stuff. And that's when you really start to reconsider everything. And it's like, do I really want to do it this way? Because in a lot of ways, there were other options. And, I remember I had one friend that I was talking to it about, and, in a sense, I kind of disagree with him, but his point still drove home. It was that we don't need another film about, be a good, strong disciple, and I think we do. I mean, I think those are a net positive,
right.
Yeah. But what he was getting at is that, like, there's a distinct angle here that, the Lord has given you passion for and insight into, and that's what we need. Like, that's what we need is this message about how discipleship is connected to Israel and the Jewish people. And I think about like the response, and I don't want to make generalizations here, because in one sense I don't like the film, like I don't like the message. Like it's a difficult, thing that you wrestle with. So I don't blame anyone for having a negative reaction to some of the things that were put forward. Because personally, even in editing it, I'm like, I don't always love that's true, and that's what the gospel is. But I think most people, and this goes back to the conversation Stephen had just kind of started. I don't think a lot of people, until maybe this last couple of years, really have thought about Israel all that much in the evangelical world. And when we do, it's definitely a side story. It's definitely the B story to me and my personal experience with Jesus. And that's not at all to discredit the personal experience to Jesus. It's just that Israel is not a side story. It's just, it never has been, never will be, in what God is doing, in the world. And so I think like what we've seen in the last year, 2 years, God just keep bringing that back up, and you're not going to run away from it, and the pastor that, is doing everything in their power to avoid having that conversation, you're going to have that conversation. I just think you're not going to get away from it. God has made this the cup of reeling, that the nations will stumble over. And I just think, this was an opportunity to frame discipleship within that story. And I think people are going to need that. I think people need to be challenged by that. People need to actually, and to the people, I think there's probably a lot of people that are like, I don't know, I support Israel, but I don't support Israel that much, and, that's fine. But I think kind of the time is now to reevaluate, and the time is now to dig deep into the scriptures, and the time is now to actually reconsider the gospel of the kingdom. So that's kind of what my perspective was on that. Whether someone agrees with it or not, that's okay. Because again, like I said, a lot of times I didn't agree with it. I thought it was difficult, and I also don't want to discredit I don't want to discredit that, because I think that's real. Like, you should be having emotions of like, is this really what God's saying? And dig into it, So that was my perspective. And I think we lost Stephen.
We did. I think we did lose Stephen. I just did I just filmed a batch, kind of bulk of the rest of my Maranatha Global Bible Study sessions for this first leg in Luke 24, and was just kind of, I wanted to spend a session hanging out on Jesus's response to the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and he said, "Oh, foolish and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken." And what struck me is that you can't believe all that the prophets have spoken if you aren't familiar with what the prophets have spoken. So again, there was a time in my life that I met the Lord with a gospel message of that Jesus died for your sins and he can make you right with God and you can be with him forever. Bow your heads, put your hand up, you know what I mean? And I thought about it for a week, but came back later and, Baptist church. So it was a lot of opportunities. And that mattered to the Lord. So I don't mean in any way to be like, you have to match my theology to be saved before the Lord. But there is, like the writer of Hebrews says, like, look, you should be feasting on steak right now, and you're still hanging out with a milk bottle because you have not grown up. And there's a maturity that's meant to take place. And if you have access to the scriptures in your own language, you have your app, you have a church to go to, like people to gather with, like, you've got more wealth and fellowship than I have. I live in an area where there's just not a lot of people who think Jesus is the incarnate word of, in the like fullness of the Godhead dwelling in bodily form. If you have access to these things, it's a wealth that most people in human history have not had, and many tens of millions don't have right now. So I, take advantage of that, but I don't want to like shame somebody into hanging out with the prophets. And I think I can be a little, even with my friends, I think I'm just being super straightforward and answering a question. They're like, why are you mean? I'm like, I'm not. So I'm trying to qualify. Like, I don't want to come off like unkind. I do want to really encourage people to, like, I'm hanging out in Jeremiah this year. I'm hanging out in Luke a lot because, the Emmaus story comes out of Luke's gospel. I've always really loved Luke's writing. And I have found, through the last couple of years and different, wells that I used to drink out of, I'm finding out now we're at best maybe a little bit brackish. And I'm like, huh. But the Lord taught me how to dig my own well. And so I'm I'm making this point just because I know that there are some people who are like, the church has gone through, it's a good thing. The Lord is exposing some things that are inappropriate and toxic to the body. But in that exposure, there's maybe a little bit of like stinging and bruising and stuff. And maybe I have to cultivate new history in very familiar texts. That's feels a little bit unstained by some of these things. So I'm hanging out in Jeremiah and Luke right now, and good things take time. That doesn't threaten me at all. So, I hope that these conversations just encourage people to go, huh, that's language I don't know, and I don't even know if it's
Right.
in the Bible. So let me go check
Right.
it out, and ideally go check it out with people.
Yeah. Did we
I
lose
don't know
Stephen again?
we might have lost Stephen.
Yeah.
He's off the good internet. Anyway, so we'll wrap that up here. We're pushing an hour now, so thank you guys both for your time. Thank you to those of you listening for hanging out with us, and what was a logistically spicy hour, but we're here. We made it. Made it. Stephanie and Reed got to the finish line. Steven got Mario Kart like banana slid off to the. He didn't make it, but
we
we
hit
win.
with the blue shell. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, Lord, thank you. We love you. Help us meet you in the scriptures and understand what you are revealing about yourself to us in these days. And we'll see you guys next time.
Amen. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, how do people watch Sojourners and Exiles?
What'd you say?
How do people watch the film?
Yeah, you go 4910films.com. Possibly we could do a link. Yeah, the number 49.
Yeah.
49 and then TEN 4910films.com. And it's just the first thing you'll see is watch now.
We will put the link here, and if we forget it, somebody's going to shame me in the comments.
Yeah.
And I welcome this. If you're watching this and the link is not in the comments, I just want to take responsibility for it on the front end. It is my fault. So,
I'll just say it again, 4910films.com. There you go.
49TEN films, plural.com.
Films, plural.com. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can also see the IC Nations film that Stephanie is in as a contributor. Also go watch that. That one's free on YouTube as well. There's a link on the website. You can find it.
And then Sojourners and Exiles is not on YouTube, but it's at 4910films.
4910films.com. There you go.
Amen. Excellent. All right.
Well, thank you for having me on. This is awesome.
Anytime. We'll see you again soon.